Take the case of an undocumented immigrant from El Salvador, profiled in the Washington Post. He was taken into custody in Texas about a month ago and separated from his 6-year-old daughter the next day.
Ya te van a ir a traer, mi amor.
¿Cuándo?
Es que no me arreglaba el avión. Maybelline, ¿tenés amiguitas ahí, mi amor?
No,
¿Ah? ¿Por qué no tenés amigas? Maybelline. Te amo, mi amor.
¿y papá?
Josh Partlow is a Mexico City bureau chief for the Washington Post who shared this just gut-wrenching story of separation with this Salvadoran father and his daughter. So, Josh, thank you so much for being with me. And I think what struck me so much about your piece is, you know, it's this perspective from the father. We talk so much about the parents being separated from the kids. It is straight from the father, not knowing where she is. And in the audio we just listened to, it's almost like this dad clearly breaking down, but trying to be brave on the phone for his little girl.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think he's trying to show that he's, you know, to reassure her and to tell her, you know, ask her, see how she's doing. But he ultimately didn't have the information, at least at that point, about where she was, how he could be together with her, what might happen to her, whether she would be deported or he would have to try to go back to the United States. So he was, yeah, I mean, it was a very raw and desperate moment for him.
So where is she, and what are immigration officials planning to do with her?
So from what we can gather, she's in a shelter in Phoenix, Arizona, run by the company Southwest Keys, which runs a lot of the shelters that are housing these migrant children. She's been able to be in touch with his lawyers who are in Texas, and they're planning to see her in the shelter tomorrow, from what we've heard. But you know, the man in El Salvador also has relatives in Kansas, so there have been a lot of calls between the shelter and the various relatives. The last I heard, the man in El Salvador, Arnovis, was planning to go to the capital to meet with the El Salvadoran government today and to see if they could help. So, you know, I think they're in process right now.
As they're in process, how often is Maybelline able to call back home?
The schedule, at least in the past week, wasn't fixed. Her other relatives, before the father got deported back to El Salvador, his parents were saying she was calling about once every 8 days. She had called his brother in Kansas twice over the past month. So I guess she had wanted to call every day, but they weren't letting her, is what the relatives told me. And that the brother also said that the 2 times she called him, she was in tears both times, asking for her dad.
Just imagine being 6 and getting to talk once every 8 days. Like, once every 8 days is a long time for you and I, but for a 6-year-old, it's a different time frame. I also read in your piece, so you're saying the dad may go to San Salvador to try to get government officials to help, but you say at the bottom of your piece, would he consider that 1,500-mile journey back up to crossing, you know, the border? You described this trip of being crammed in the back of a cargo truck. Would he do that again if it meant getting to her?
Yeah, that's what he says. He says he's ready to do that again and go through all of that. He thinks that at least if he could get in front of a judge in the United States and tell him that he's been separated from his daughter, that maybe that's an avenue for him. And he said he's willing to be jailed for however long it takes, for months or years, if he could just tell someone in the U.S. that his daughter's still there. So, I mean, you kind of see doesn't understand exactly how the system works. He's desperate. I mean, he doesn't know what to do.
One case of thousands. Joshua Partlow in Mexico City, thank you so much for sharing that story.